Hello and welcome to another episode of the Conversion of Granny Grumman. In this episode, we'll be installing the subfloor. I put the dimensions of Granny Grumman into SketchUp so I could create a rough design of what I'm going for. After picking up 2x4s, some plywood, and some polyiso insulation, I was ready to begin the build. Measure twice, cut once is one of the most important things anybody doing woodwork can ever learn. After double checking my measurements, I began marking off the wood and cutting it to size. Before permanently attaching the subfloor frame to the floor of Granny Grumman, I want to test fit everything to ensure that my theoretical plan works in practice. With all the supplies out of the way, I'll continue measuring, cutting, and test fitting every single piece. Since most of the walking in the van will be done right down the middle, since storage and cabinets will be along the side, I decided to add one more set of 2x4s right down the middle of the subfloor frame. On my first van build, I used construction adhesive to glue the floor down, and it ended up lifting up in some areas. So this time, I'll be using 1/4 20 carriage bolts drilled through the 2x4s and the floor of Granny Grumman, apply some silicone, a washer, a lock washer, a nut, and then tighten them down with my impact. Now that the subfloor framing is securely attached to the floor of Granny Grumman, I can sweep out any of the sawdust that was left over and then begin installing the polyiso rigid foam insulation. After measuring and marking down the dimensions of each section that the insulation would go into, I can begin marking the insulation and cutting it. Before pressing the foam into place, I'm going to apply a little construction adhesive just to make sure that it doesn't move around. With the final piece of insulation installed, I can now begin measuring, cutting, and test fitting the plywood that'll go over the insulation and the subfloor frame. One thing that's really nice about Granny Grumman is everything is a 90-degree angle, making all the cuts super simple and super easy, very unlike my first van build. The last piece I cut was quite a tight fit, so using a rubber mallet, I gently massaged it into place. With all the plywood in place, I can now begin attaching it to the 2x4 framing by using wood screws. And just like that, Granny Grumman has a subfloor. It is so encouraging and exciting to finally see part of the conversion process happening to Granny Grumman. After almost a year of mechanical repairs, it's finally getting close to becoming the tiny home that I know it can be, and that is so encouraging.